What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Jake here, aka BrusHstroKeZ, and today I wanted to show you my technique on doing some wood grain painting. I got some light switch covers here from my house that I want to update. They're just kind of the cream color, plain generic ones. Just want to make it look a little nicer, match some of the wood trim and the wood doors and all of that in the house. So I thought I'd show you my technique on how to do this. So first off, let's get into what we will be using. I do use Createx mostly because I spray a lot inside my house. As you can see, my kitchen's right there. But anyway, what we're going to be using is some yellow auto-borne sealer, some 4011 reducer, also some 4021 reducer. If you don't know, this is Createx's new reducer. This does work amazing. It really smooths out the paint. One thing it does, it helps keep the paint wet. It does keep paint wet longer than the 4011. So just a little piece of advice. I like using 4011 still in the auto-borne sealer, or anytime I want my paint to dry faster. Anytime I'm airbrushing though, definitely like the 4021, helps reduce dry tip. But anyway, so we got our yellow auto-borne sealer, and then there's three different colors I like to use when doing wood grain. First is your burnt umber. Doesn't have to be the detail kind, doesn't really matter. You got burnt sienna, and this is sepia. Right there in a smaller bottle. So, and then some transparent auto-borne sealer as well. That's what we'll be finishing it off with. So I'm going to prep these off camera so you don't have to watch, but I'm just going to clean them good with some lacquer thinner. And then I got a 500 grit sanding sponge here that's kind of worn out, needs to be blown out, but that's a 500 grit. You can sand these with 400 to 600 grit because we're going to apply the auto-borne sealer first. I did mix it up already. Any Createx paints, you want to mix and reduce them, and then mix them up real good, let them sit for a good 10 minutes or so, and they'll flow way better than just mixing it and spraying it right away. So I'm going to go off camera, get these prepped, cleaned, and ready to wood grain. All right, so now I got these all cleaned up and sanded, and then I did use some wax and grease or final wipe on these that has some anti-static properties since we're working with plastic. One thing I forgot to mention, in my mix of the yellow auto-borne sealer, I did put a drop of the sienna in there to kind of mute the yellow a little bit. I don't know if it's going to transpire on camera as well, but I just didn't want the yellow to be as bright canary yellow, so I just added a little, like a drop or two of paint in there to kind of mellow that color out. You can use a spray gun or whatever you want. I'm just using the PS290 by Krios. This is available at Spray Gunner. It's a nice little gun you can do the fan pattern on. So I got my paint in here, and we're just gonna get these covered with some yellow sealer. We'll probably do 2 coats on these just to make sure we got full coverage. And for this step too, you don't have to use the yellow. You can use like a tan or whatever the lightest color of the wood you want. As you can see, my trim in my house has a real yellow tint or staining to it. So just kind of trying to match that tone. That's why I'm using the yellow. Last one here. And then we will give these approximately 10 minutes or so to dry. I have an accelerated drying system here, right here. Just a little fan on a stool. I just turn that baby on. When you're drying water-based paint, you don't really want to blow the air directly at it. You want to kind of blow it so the air goes across the surface, and that way it helps dry it more evenly. But since we need to let our Createx paint wait about 10 minutes to get mixed up good and well before we use it, we'll take advantage of the drying time on this first coat. We'll go ahead and mix up our second color. So what I like to do is use my detail burnt umber. Now this is, I think it's, not sure if this is a new mix or what of Wicked, but this color seems to be super thick, as you'll see here in just a second. Look at how thick that is. So with this mix, I like to go about 50-50 with the burnt umber and the burnt sienna. You can kind of see the two different colors there. Now, for this one, we're going to reduce it with the 40-21, because this is something we want to keep wet a little bit longer, because we are actually going to use a little 3-inch chip brush. I don't know where this is from, either Walmart or Menards hardware store, but they usually sell these pretty cheap. You can get them in a variety of different thicknesses. This is the one I use for my wood grain. But we're going to go ahead and reduce this a little bit and get it mixed up. And here's kind of one of the, I don't know if you can see it. See, it's kind of, that paint's seeding up. The thicker Createx paints tend to do that once you reduce them. But we will come back in 10 minutes and see if just letting this sit gets rid of that seediness. So I'm going to cut you off here, come back when these are dry, and we'll go ahead and get the second round of paint on them. All right, so now we're ready for the fun part. Off camera, I went ahead and sprayed the second coat on these and gave them about 10 minutes to dry. So here comes the fun part where we start our wood graining. So what I do is take my chip brush. Actually, look at our paint now too. Well, that seeding went away. Really smooth now. So what I like to do, I take my popsicle stick and just kind of dab the bristles in random areas. You don't want a ton of paint on your paintbrush for this initial step. We're just going to go ahead and swipe it. So by putting that 20 or 40-21 reducer in our paint, it allows it to stay wet longer so we can manipulate it with the brush. So that's good for the initial round. I tend to do a few different rounds and change colors just to give it more depth and tones. Again, this is a really fun way of painting because you don't have to be precise. You can kind of mess around, try different strokes, you can make little knots. I don't like that knot, but you can put paint knots in this stuff. You can just have fun with it. There's no No rules to this. Alright, so that is our first round. As you can see, it actually looks pretty nice the way it is. But I'm going to go ahead, get my fan turned on here, let this dry 5-10 minutes, and come back, and we'll do our final step on making these wood grain. Alright, so it's been roughly 10 minutes or so. Let this dry. That way that paint stays in place. So what I like to do is add some sepia, which is like a really dark brown, to my already painted mix. Just like that. I don't even fully stir it usually. I just partially stir it. As you can kind of see, there's kind of like two different colors of paint in there. And then I'll just go ahead and do the same thing we did the last time. Just dab a little bit of paint on here, on the bristles. Then we'll do the same thing we did before. It adds a little bit more depth. Actually, I think I want it a little bit darker. A little more contrast. There we go. I like that. Yeah, this is the fun part where you can just play with the different colors. I would recommend going light to darker, give you more depth. All right, there we go. Not too bad. Pretty fairly close enough to the trim that I'm happy with it. So we're going to go ahead and let these dry, come back for our final step. All right, so we've let these dry about 10 minutes or so with the fan going. One thing I did want to mention, you know how I mentioned using the 4012 reducer helps keep your paint wet longer. That's good and all, but if you're doing something huge that you're trying to wood grain, you could also use this retarder that Createx makes. Definitely keeps the paint wet for a really long time, and you barely have to use any of this, like maybe a drop in an ounce will really retard it and slow down the dry time for you too. So just keep that in mind if you're doing something big that you want to wood grain. But for our final step here, I did go ahead and mix up some transparent sealer, auto-borne sealer. This transparent sealer has like a nice sheen. It's not super glossy. It almost retains the same sheen that we're getting right now with that paint, which I like. And this auto-borne sealer, this stuff is really, really durable too, so I like to use it for top coat on a lot of stuff, like on my canvases that I finish painting. Anything I want kind of a satiny, not a glossy finish, and something that's not going to be exposed to the elements either. So all right, so I'm just gonna I usually do 2 coats of this just to make sure I got full coverage. And while I'm using it, this little minigun with the fan pattern, I love it for little stuff like this, or doing speed shapes or any little graphics or anything. It's a great tool to have in your arsenal. I do have a link to this down in the comments at Spray Gunner. That's where you typically find the best price and service. Plus, they're the only ones that carry all the parts for this thing as well. So, let that dry. I'm going to do another coat probably off camera, and then I'll come back and show you the final result. All right, here they are, all done. Kind of see that little bit of sheen on them. But yeah, this is a really fun way of painting. You can kind of just go at it however you want. But yeah, that's all I had for you this time. Till the next one, keep those brushes stroking.